Melissa. Chris, Melissa used to work for Andrew Cuomo. Did you know that?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So are you following our mayoral race in New York?
I have
Very
not.
strange. It's very strange. We have an incumbent who's under indictment who stands trial later this year. There's talk that the case is going to be dropped. But ironically, while he's turned to Trump for either dropping the charges or potential pardon, reportedly, what's hurting him now with voters is he's too close to Trump, and his approval rating is really low. And it's hard to imagine him running and winning. Every announced candidate besides him is to the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. There's a few others, but the people who have a chance in raising money, they're all extremely far left. Andrew Cuomo hasn't said he's running, but it's been widely reported that he might. So here's some questions for Melissa because she's very close to you. There's a report that there's a super PAC being formed to help Andrew Cuomo. Do you know anything about that?
I would refer those questions to Steve Cohen, who was talked about in the New York Times article about that.
Steve Cohen is someone you know well, the Governor Cuomo knows well. What has Governor Cuomo done to position himself to run?
You are not going to trap me into this.
Okay. All right. Last question, because you've talked about this before. There's been about 6 public polls since we last talked to you about this, showing him, Governor Cuomo, way ahead, and almost even or especially with ranked choice voting, winning quite easily. And people ask me if you assume the incumbent Mayor Adams isn't going to win. People ask me, well, after Cuomo, who's the most likely? There really isn't an answer because there's no one else in the race strong. So, what's your analysis of the most recent polls regarding Governor Cuomo?
So I will say, Mark, I came on your show at some point in the beginning of December, and we had an initial conversation about this potential race. And
Yeah.
I said on your show that I had seen private polling that showed if Andrew Cuomo ran, he would win, and it wouldn't even be close. And there was a bunch of press that was then generated off of those comments. And then lo and behold, fast forward 6 weeks, and what I said on your show that time ago has now played out through this various steady stream of polling. I mean, it's very straightforward to me and very clear to me. New York City is in crisis. There feels like there's been an abdication of leadership. This was apparent both in the feeling in New York and also in the polling, even pre-Trump being elected, pre-indictment, pre-investigations. This was a problem Eric Adams had that he could never really wrap his arms around. His numbers were at historic lows then. They've only proceeded to get worse now. And I think that Eric Adams's problem is he has 2 competing goals. One is to stay out of jail, and the other is to get reelected. And those 2 things don't go together, because in order to stay out of jail, you have to be in the good graces of Donald Trump. And when you're dealing with the Democratic primary in New York City, Donald Trump, it's like making a deal with the devil in the eyes of the primary voters in New York City. What was interesting about the poll that came out today is that Donald Trump's number is actually better than Eric Adams' number
Top approval number.
among
Yeah.
primary Democratic voters in New York City. Neither of them are good. Eric Adams has an 81% disapproval number, or 83%. Donald Trump's at 81%. So
Is
they're
that fave unfave or job approval?
that's fave unfave.
Yeah.
So that's where that stands. And then separately, you have sort of the 7 dwarfs. It almost feels like there's this pack of candidates who are like, it's like these like smaller than life personalities, former and current elected officials who have, despite some of them being in office, like Scott Stringer since 1992, people still don't know what he stands for, who he is. Brad Lander, who is a citywide comptroller candidate who's run many times. People still don't really know who he is. He gets on camera and you're like, really? This guy? This is the guy you think should run New York City? I don't think so. And Andrew Cuomo, despite everything that he went through, retains a tremendous amount of goodwill from Democrats in New York. In New York City, his bond with the African American community is unbreakable. Same goes for the Hispanic community. It doesn't get nearly the same lip service, but like unbreakable bond with the Hispanic community. And white outer borough working class voters like him, trust him, believe that he works for them, see themselves in him. He's a Queens guy, grew up, driving a tow truck, worked his way through law school, all the things. So where the race stands right now is if Andrew Cuomo decides to get in, I retain the same position I had at the beginning of December. Nothing's changed. If anything, the dynamic has improved for him. If he runs, he wins, and it's not even close. His negatives are baked. And to the extent that people who are so unsophisticated, both in the press and the chattering class, continue to say, oh, he just pops in the polls because of name ID. No, name ID is when you're aware of someone's name, but you don't know anything about them. That would be like saying Bill Clinton has name ID, Donald Trump has name ID. No, people know who Andrew Cuomo is. He served in office for 20 years for the state of New York. He's Mario Cuomo's son. He was HUD secretary. So it's not like they're just aware of his name and then they're going to learn about him and all of a sudden be like, wait a minute, that's that guy?